She disappeared more than 80 days ago, and in a case that has consumed national attention, the questions are not getting fewer. They are getting harder. Nancy Guthrie, the mother of a prominent television personality, was reported missing from her home in Arizona. She is elderly. She was taken, according to investigators, by force. And now, weeks into one of the most closely watched missing persons and suspected kidnapping investigations in recent memory, federal authorities are still piecing together a picture that refuses to come into full focus. The search for Nancy Guthrie has drawn resources from some of the most capable arms of federal law enforcement in the country. The FBI has been leading the investigation on the ground, coordinating with local authorities, including the Pima County Sheriff's Department. Tip lines have been flooded. Patrols have been increased in the neighborhood where Nancy Guthrie lived. And yet, as of today, no suspect has been publicly identified. No arrest has been made. And Nancy Guthrie has not been found. What has emerged in recent days is a combination of physical evidence, contested forensic claims, and a ransom situation that analysts say has been handled in a way that raises serious concerns about the intentions of whoever is holding her or whoever claims to be. To understand where this case stands right now, it is important to understand where it began, what investigators have found, what they have disputed, and what questions remain unanswered going into what is now the third month of this disappearance. Nancy Guthrie is described as an elderly woman, known most publicly as the mother of a well-known morning television personality. Her disappearance sent shockwaves through both the media world and the general public. Within days of her going missing, federal authorities confirmed they were treating the case as a kidnapping. That determination set off a chain of events that has not stopped moving since. In the earliest days of the investigation, officials focused heavily on the immediate environment. Neighbors were interviewed. Security cameras were canvassed. The home itself was treated as a primary scene. What emerged from that initial sweep would set the tone for a case that would become increasingly complicated as weeks turned into months. The FBI tip line, according to available reporting, received more than 18,000 calls. That number reflects the scale of public engagement with this case. It also reflects the challenge facing investigators. Sorting through thousands of tips, many of them unlikely to yield actionable information, is an enormous undertaking. And yet it remains one of the central activities of the investigation even now, more than 80 days in. The family of Nancy Guthrie has been largely private in their public communications. There have been limited statements. The most prominent public figure connected to the family has, according to reports, returned to her professional work while the search continues. That decision, to return to a public-facing role while a family member remains missing, speaks to a particular kind of sustained pressure that few people can fully imagine. Law enforcement has made clear that the investigation is active, but active does not mean resolved. And the gap between those two things is where this story currently lives. In the next part, we turn to the physical evidence. What investigators found inside Nancy Guthrie's home, what the FBI's elite forensic unit is now examining, and why the lab connected to some of the highest profile criminal convictions in recent years has now become part of this case. Inside Nancy Guthrie's home, investigators made a discovery that they described using a specific and deliberate phrase, potentially critical. That is a precise choice of words in a law enforcement context. It is not confirmation. It is not certainty. But it signals that what was found carried enough weight to be treated as a priority piece of evidence. The items in question are hair samples. Hairs recovered from inside the residence were flagged as potentially significant. In the world of forensic investigation, hair evidence carries a complex history. Its usefulness depends entirely on whether DNA can be extracted and whether that DNA can be matched to a known profile in an existing database or to a specific individual under investigation. According to available reporting, initial forensic testing on evidence connected to this case did not produce an identification. That result prompted a significant step. The evidence was sent to the FBI's laboratory at Quantico, Virginia. Quantico is not a routine facility. It is the Bureau's most advanced forensic operation. The decision to route evidence there reflects the seriousness with which federal investigators are treating the physical material gathered from the scene. The lab at Quantico has a notable history in high-profile criminal cases. It has been connected to forensic work tied to some of the most complex prosecutions in recent American legal history, including cases involving long-term serial criminal activity. Its involvement in the Nancy Guthrie investigation adds a layer of institutional weight to the forensic dimension of this case. But there is a complication. Reports have surfaced questioning whether some of the evidence being discussed publicly is actually new. The FBI, in a rare direct statement on the matter, indicated that certain pieces of information being characterized as recent developments were, in the Bureau's assessment, not new at all. That distinction matters significantly in an ongoing investigation. It suggests that some of the information flowing through public channels may be either outdated, mischaracterized, or both. This gap between what is being reported and what investigators confirm creates a specific kind of problem. In a case with as much public attention as this one, the narrative can move faster than the facts. Investigators have to manage not just the investigation itself, but also the public dimension of the case, and the two do not always align. Former federal agents with experience in kidnapping investigations have offered analytical perspective on the evidence situation. One recurring observation from those with investigative backgrounds is that kidnappers in this case appear to have operated with what analysts describe as inconsistency from the beginning. That pattern, they say, is both a challenge and potentially a clue. Meanwhile, one additional forensic development has drawn attention from outside observers. The laboratory associated with DNA work in the Gilgo Beach serial killing investigation, a case that itself represented a decades-long forensic challenge before a conviction, has now been mentioned in connection with the Nancy Guthrie matter. The precise nature of that connection has not been fully detailed in available reports. But the linkage to a lab associated with complex, long-delayed DNA resolution has not gone unnoticed by those following this case. What investigators are working with, then, is a combination of physical evidence whose full significance has not yet been established, a forensic process that is ongoing at the nation's most capable analytical facility, and a public information environment where the line between confirmed fact and speculation is not always clearly drawn. The physical evidence may ultimately be the most durable part of this investigation. It does not change, it does not remember incorrectly, it does not have motivations, and if it yields a profile, it may provide the clearest path forward in a case where so much else remains uncertain. Coming up, the ransom dimension of this case, what the note said, what analysts make of its language, and why one former federal agent has raised the possibility of a very specific type of individual being behind this crime. Among the most unsettling developments in the Nancy Guthrie case is the ransom communication. Not because ransom notes are unusual in kidnapping investigations, they are not, but because of what this particular note said, and because of the profile it suggests. According to reports citing documents obtained by media outlets tracking the investigation, a ransom note surfaced, making the claim that Nancy Guthrie is no longer alive. The note, as described in available reporting, stated that the elderly woman is dead. That claim has not been confirmed by law enforcement. The FBI has not publicly corroborated what the note says, and investigators have not confirmed the death of Nancy Guthrie. In kidnapping cases, false claims of death in ransom communications are not without precedent. They can be deployed as psychological pressure. They can be used to destabilize families and push them toward faster or less calculated responses. The ransom note, in this case, has been analyzed with that possibility in mind. Former FBI agents consulted in public commentary on this investigation have offered a consistent characterization of the approach taken by whoever is holding Nancy Guthrie, or whoever claims to be. The word used most frequently is bad faith. From the beginning of the ransom process, according to that analysis, the behavior of the individuals responsible has been marked by a pattern of inconsistency, misdirection, and what investigators describe as psychological manipulation. Mind games is a phrase that has appeared in coverage of how the kidnappers have operated, whether that characterization comes from formal investigative sources or from outside analytical perspective. The underlying observation is the same. Whoever is behind this crime has not behaved in the straightforward way that investigators can most easily work with. The demands have not been clear. The communications have not been consistent. And that pattern has complicated the process of negotiation and response. One former federal agent, speaking in the context of public analysis rather than official comment, raised a possibility that adds another dimension to this case. The ransom note and the broader pattern of communication, according to that analysis, may reflect the involvement of someone with a particular belief system. The framing used was that the individual behind this could be someone who sees themselves as operating with a kind of moral or spiritual authority. Someone who does not view what they are doing as a conventional crime, that is a specific and unusual profile. In kidnapping investigations, religious or ideological motivation is a less common driver than financial desperation or personal grievance. When it appears, it tends to produce exactly the kind of unpredictable, non-rational communication pattern that analysts are describing in this case. The ransom notes claim that Nancy Guthrie is dead must be held at a careful distance until it can be evaluated through other evidence. If it is false, it represents an attempt at psychological leverage. If it reflects reality, the nature of this investigation changes significantly. Law enforcement has not said which of those possibilities they believe to be true. That silence is itself informative. The tip line with 18,000 calls points to a public that is engaged and watching. Former investigators have noted that in cases with this level of public attention, the volume of incoming information is both an asset and a burden. Useful tips are in there. So is an enormous amount of noise. The challenge is not getting information. It is finding the right information inside a volume that is almost impossible to process quickly. Meanwhile, law enforcement has made active requests for security camera footage from neighbors in the area surrounding Nancy Guthrie's residence. That request suggests investigators believe there is footage that exists and has not yet been collected. It also suggests that there may be a gap in the visual record of what happened in the period surrounding her disappearance. Surveillance footage, when recovered, can establish timelines, identify vehicles, and in some cases, identify individuals. Its absence is a gap. Its recovery, if it happens, could be significant. The ransom communication, the behavioral analysis, and the request for footage are all converging toward the same question. What actually happened in and around that home, and who was responsible? Up next, the two names that have repeatedly surfaced in public discussions of this case, and why law enforcement's focus on the immediate environment of Nancy Guthrie's life has not gone away. In almost every high-profile missing persons investigation, there comes a moment when attention begins to focus inward. Not outward toward unknown strangers, but inward toward the people closest to the person who disappeared. That moment has arrived in the Nancy Guthrie case, and two names in particular have become central to that discussion. Annie Guthrie and Tommaso Cioni are individuals connected to the Guthrie family who have, according to available reporting, come back into focus as part of the investigative and public conversation around this case. The specific reasons for that renewed attention have not been fully explained in official statements. But the pattern of coverage and analytical commentary makes clear that investigators and observers have not set them aside. It is important to state clearly what is known and what is not. Neither Annie Guthrie nor Tommaso Cioni has been publicly charged in connection with Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. Law enforcement has not officially named either individual as a suspect in public statements available at the time of this reporting. What exists is a pattern of scrutiny, a pattern of public analytical attention, and a series of reports that have repeatedly returned to these two individuals as figures of interest in the broader investigation. Former federal agents commenting publicly on the case have addressed the question of Tommaso Cioni and Annie Guthrie directly. The analysis offered focuses on their potential knowledge of circumstances surrounding the disappearance and on behavioral and circumstantial observations that investigators and analysts have flagged. One line of expert commentary has focused specifically on the question of what individuals close to a victim might know, even if they were not directly involved in the crime itself. In parallel, Annie Guthrie and Tommaso Cioni have themselves issued public statements. According to reporting on those communications, they have addressed their situation and the scrutiny they are under. The characterization of those statements as a bold warning reflects the directness with which they have chosen to engage with the public conversation around their involvement or alleged non-involvement in the case. The Pima County Sheriff's Department, which has jurisdiction in the area where Nancy Guthrie lived and where the investigation began, became the subject of attention for an entirely different reason. The department, already described in reports as facing challenges, became the focus of criticism after what was described as an inappropriate social media post from the sheriff. A post referencing the name Nancy in a context that observers described as deeply unsuitable given the ongoing investigation drew significant negative reaction. The department subsequently released a statement addressing what it characterized as technical issues. The nature and context of those technical issues were not detailed in available reporting in a way that resolved the public concern. For a department already facing scrutiny in a major federal investigation, the reputational dimension of that episode was significant. And it speaks to a broader tension in this case between local and federal authority. The FBI is leading this investigation. Local law enforcement is operating in a supportive capacity. When local officials act in ways that generate negative attention, it adds a layer of complexity to an already difficult situation. Law enforcement has increased patrols in the neighborhood. That step can serve multiple purposes. It is a visible sign of continued engagement. It may also reflect a specific concern about activity in the area, either because of the ongoing investigation or because of concerns about the safety of others in the vicinity of where a crime was committed. The increased patrols, combined with the renewed focus on individuals connected to the Guthrie family, suggest that investigators have not settled into a static posture. The investigation is moving. Whether it is moving toward resolution is the question that cannot yet be answered. The White House has also been drawn into the periphery of this case. According to reporting, presidential staff confirmed that the president reviewed images described as relating to a potential suspect in the Guthrie investigation. That involvement was characterized with language reflecting serious concern about what was seen. The extent to which that executive-level attention will translate into additional federal resources or pressure on the investigation is not clear from available information. The involvement of the presidency, even in a limited and informal way, speaks to the scale of public and institutional attention on this case. It is not common for the highest levels of American government to be drawn into individual missing persons investigations. The fact that this one reached that level of visibility reflects both the profile of the family involved and the nature of what happened. In the final part, we take stock of where this investigation stands, what still needs to be explained, what the coming days may bring, and what it means that more than 80 days have passed without resolution. 80 days. That number carries weight in a kidnapping investigation. The passage of time does not work in the favor of missing persons cases. It does not improve the quality of evidence. It does not make witnesses easier to find. It does not make physical traces more durable. Every day that passes narrows, in a statistical sense, the range of outcomes that investigators can still hope for. And yet the FBI's involvement, the forensic work underway at Quantico, and the continued active posture of law enforcement suggest that investigators have not concluded this is a case without resolution. The work is still going. The tips are still being processed. The security footage is still being sought. The hair evidence is still being analyzed. What this investigation reveals in its current state is a set of tensions that define the most difficult class of kidnapping cases. There is physical evidence, but it has not yet produced an identification. There is ransom communication. Its claims have not been verified. There are individuals under scrutiny, but no public charges have been filed. There is a massive volume of public tip information, but the signal has not been clearly separated from the noise. The ransom notes claim that Nancy Guthrie is no longer alive stands as one of the most consequential, unresolved elements of this entire case. If it is true, the investigation shifts from a rescue operation to a homicide. If it is false, it is a deliberate attempt to manipulate the people who love her and the investigators trying to find her. Either possibility is serious. Neither has been confirmed. The family continues to wait. The television personality connected to this case returned to her public role, not as a sign of indifference, but as an act of extraordinary resilience. Maintaining professional function while a parent remains missing is not something most people will ever have to do. The quiet weight of that reality is visible in the public record of this story, even when it is not spoken directly. Former investigative professionals who have analyzed this case publicly have pointed to the behavioral evidence as potentially more telling than any single piece of physical evidence. The pattern of communication from whoever is responsible, the resistance to straightforward engagement, the psychological dimension of the ransom process, all of those things point toward a particular kind of actor. Whether investigators have built a profile around that analysis, and whether that profile has narrowed the field of suspects, is not known from available public information. What is known is this. The FBI released a statement in recent weeks, its first substantive communication in some time. That statement confirmed continued active engagement with the investigation. It addressed certain claims about evidence, and it did not announce resolution. The investigation is active. Nancy Guthrie has not been found. The people who took her have not been publicly identified. The questions that were there on day 1 are still there on day 80. Some of them are the same questions. Others have become more complicated. Whether the forensic work at Quantico produces a result, whether the security footage request turns up something usable, whether the tip line eventually delivers a credible lead that investigators can act on. None of those possibilities has been ruled out. None of them has been confirmed. The case moves forward slowly, with the burden that all of this time has accumulated around it. And Nancy Guthrie is still out there somewhere, in circumstances that no one who has been following the story can afford to stop thinking about.